One of the Vatican's most powerful figures has shaken everyone with his latest statements. Words spoken in public, but with such destabilizing weight that they seemed like the culmination of a process no one had ever dared to openly admit. For some, it is a sign that the church we know may no longer exist. What if that were really the case? Stay until the end. What emerges changes everything. The scene is this. Amidst the usual apparent calm of the Vatican buildings, a statement emerges that shocks even the most patient. It doesn't come from a marginal voice, but from a figure who really counts, a first-level official, so influential that some, jokingly, speculate that one day, when the ordination rules change, she might even be called a prelate. For now, he isn't, but that doesn't matter. What matters is the weight of his role and the echo of his words, because from his lips came something that very much resembles an admission, albeit cleverly dressed in soft phrases. The idea behind his speech is one that many have feared for years, that synodality is not just tweaking a few procedures, but reshaping the very identity of the church. Naturally, the person concerned never uses clear-cut expressions like new religion. It would be too honest, too risky, too clear. He prefers to rely on that mishmash of generic words that has now become the official lexicon of change. Listening, journey, context, reciprocity, plurality. In detail, it was a simple interview which appeared in the circles that closely follow the synodal process that brought to light a statement that alarmed many attentive Catholics. According to Radical Fidelity, the speaker was French nun Natalia Bequart, a leading figure in the Synod on Synodality and now described as the most powerful woman in the Vatican. It is in this context that, answering a question about the unity of the Church, he let slip an idea that until a few years ago, no Vatican official would have dared to formulate so openly. She was asked how it is possible to practice synodality in very different cultures and countries without jeopardizing Catholic unity. A legitimate question, because a church that changes its face everywhere risks becoming unrecognizable. Bequart's response made some people prick up their ears. According to her, the Church is not looking for a standardized model. Synodality will never be something that everyone has to do in the same way, and local realities must be respected. He added that there are many ways of being church, and that no single model can be imposed. These are his words as reported. At first listen, they may seem like harmless formulas, but the meaning they carry with them is anything but banal. Because if we affirm that there is no single model of faith, we are admitting that the Church can present itself in profoundly different, almost unconnected forms. If we insist that each community must do it its own way, then what for 2,000 years has been considered universal, doctrine, discipline, sacraments, becomes a garment that everyone can cut as they wish. And if we affirm that there are many ways of being church, the risk is clear. The Church is no longer one, but a sum of local experiences, a federation of communities, a mosaic where unity is based not on revealed truth, but on continuous dialogue between different groups. The most revealing detail is what's never said. Not once does Bequart's response mention the Church's essential mission, the salvation of souls. There's not even a reference to the faith transmitted by the apostles, nor to the obligation to preserve it intact. Everything revolves around local realities, cultures, dialogues, and meetings between episcopal conferences and continents. It is as if the driving force of the Church was no longer Christ and his doctrine, but the context and sensitivity of the moment. And this is precisely what has led to talk of a new religion. Not because she has declared it openly, indeed, she carefully avoids strong words, but because the model she describes no longer resembles the Catholic Church as we have known it, one and identical in its essence everywhere. This response does not simply represent a pastoral update, but rather the implicit proposal of a new, fluid, culturally relevant church, shaped from the bottom up. A church that changes depending on where it is located, and that considers the principle of unity, founded on the same faith, to be outdated. Before understanding why certain statements are interpreted as a sign of a new religion, it is necessary to remember the doctrinal context in which this debate takes place. For more than a century, well before the Second Vatican Council, the pontiffs had identified a phenomenon that was slowly infiltrating the Church, the set of errors that Pius X would later define as modernism. It was not a compact doctrine, but a mentality, a way of reading faith as something changeable, to be adapted to the times and tastes. Pius XIII, several decades later, spoke of certain theological fashions that sought to recover customs and forms of the first centuries to justify radical changes in the present, and warned against what he called exaggerated antiquarianism. That is, the idea that everything ancient is automatically purer, more authentic, more true. A strong appeal because even then, proposals were beginning to circulate that would only find full fruition years later. This is the ground that allows us to understand why many today see in certain synodal speeches the repetition of errors already highlighted by the popes of the 20th century. The ancient temptation of archaeology to go back to the first centuries, imagining that there was a perfect church there waiting to be restored, reappears in another guise, more elegant but no less problematic. The idea that each community can reinterpret the faith according to its own context and sensibilities. For the modernists, the church of the present would be somehow distant from the apostolic one, and for this reason, it would be necessary to go back to the origins, often forcing texts or figures of the fathers to justify contemporary practices. This is the pattern that the article from which it all began indicates as the core of the change. A church that no longer starts from received tradition, but from what is thought to have been the spirit of the first Christians, interpreted, however, through the lens of the present. This way of reasoning has a precise consequence. If one imagines that the church has lost something over the centuries, then everything that came after becomes questionable, modifiable, even reversible. And what for Catholic doctrine is a deposit received once and for all is transformed into material to be reworked. This is why, when a central figure of the synod pronounces vague formulas on listening, processes, cultural contexts, and plurality of ways of being church, many read in them the sign of that old error that the popes had already condemned. A faith reduced to subjective experience, not to transmitted divine truth. Today's climate only amplifies this perception. What was once recognized as a theological deviation now appears as an official project. If you feel the need to rediscover the peace, beauty, and depth of authentic faith, let Gregorian chant accompany you. Visit Fides et Traditio. You'll find voices, prayers, and sounds that bring the heart back to the silence of God. Find the link in the description. What do you think? If you liked the video, comment Amen. God bless you,